Good morning. It's very nice to see everyone. I'm Michael Drake, and I'm the Chancellor here at the University of California, Irvine. It's my privilege to be able to welcome you once again. This is the 22nd annual healthcare forecast that we've hosted, presented by the Paul Merage School of Business, and it's a pleasure every year to be able to speak to this audience. It's very nice to have an audience that's made up of people from so many different points of view and walks of life who come together to listen to our panel of speakers and to discuss the very, very important issues that we face in healthcare in this country. It's also such an active area of social and political and policy change. It's kind of fun to look back at the things that we've talked about over the years and to see what we've predicted and kind of handicap how often we've been. No, skip that. I won't go into that. But it's been quite interesting to see how things have changed over the years and the different things that have come forward. There's been a great deal of change. This last year, in fact, had several things that were very, very important. We had, of course, a couple of years ago, the passage of the Affordable Care Act. And then just last June, after years of wrangling, a Supreme Court decision on its constitutionality. But still, things were a bit in abeyance until last fall's election. But each of those things made a real difference in the likelihood that different components of the Affordable Care Act will come to light. And now it's time for implementation. And there are a couple of realities that we face, again, in 2013, looking forward, that were things that would have been different 10 years ago or 20 years ago when we were talking about these same things, but really in a different milieu. We used to have nearly infinite resources for healthcare. I'll say nearly infinite resources. If we go back to the turn of the century, around 2000, we were spending about $1 trillion a year on healthcare using very round figures. And that has gone up to between $2.5 and $3 trillion this year. So that's, in my mind, that's nearly infinite. That's an infinite amount of money. And we had very little transparency, and there were very little parameters tied to outcomes or oversight. And so now there's much more oversight and a real focus on limiting resources. I think that performance will be scrutinized to ensure a cost-efficient and a cost-effective health care. One of my favorite little nuances there, this is something that actually was a part of the Affordable Care Act, and that I thought was a good reflection of some of the issues that were being discussed, was the talk a couple of years ago, mainly on Twitter as a place for a good intellectual discourse. But there was largely on Twitter feeds about the death panel concept and what that would do. That was one of the provisions of the act as it was being discussed. And as you remember, this was basically to compensate physicians for talking to patients about end-of-life care or letting patients know that there were end-of-life care services that were covered by Medicare. So the services were already covered. The concept was, what about counseling people about those services that are available, and that was the concept of the death panel, and could that be charged? And that was actually removed from the act because it was so politically hot. The concept that you could tell people that these services were available. One of the services that was available was hospice care. And just to compare hospice care, a study that was done recently looking at hospice care, there were 4 things that were true about hospice care, people who died in hospice care. One was that the cost of the person dying compared to someone with a similar set of circumstances was about $50,000 less on average. So it was less expensive by a substantial amount of money to die in hospice. Another was that the patient who died was rated as having less pain during the last days of life if they died in hospice. So it was less expensive and less painful for the patient. A third was that 6 months later, when the level of depression surrounding the loss of the family member was examined in the family had less depression if the patient died in hospice. And just in shorthand, in general, people had a chance to say goodbye in respectful circumstances and felt better 6 months later. And then the fourth thing that was true is that the people who died in hospice compared to their cohort lived longer. That wasn't much longer, but they lived several days on average longer than people who had the same diagnosis and died without being in hospice. So it was less expensive, it was less painful, your family was less depressed, and you lived longer. But that became a political hot button, so it was pulled out. The ability to advise people of these things was pulled out of the discussion. And so it just was a good reminder to me that politics are really, really important in the policies that we bring forward. And you can have things that, to me, I would say don't make any sense or are counterproductive, but can become politically hot and then get removed. And so I think there'll be a lot more focus on those kinds of things as we go forward. The American healthcare system, there was a study by the Institute of Medicine that was out this last fall looking at the American healthcare system. The basic theme was better care at lower cost, and it predicted, or it found that in 2010 there were about $750 billion spent on the American healthcare system that had no improvement in care for anyone. Essentially, they referred to that as wasted money. So $750 billion in 2010 is 3 years later. That's probably, again, pretty close to a nice round number of about $1 trillion that's spent with no particular outcome. And I think that gives all of us a lot to sort of chew on for what will roll forward in these next days. So a forecast about those things is, and a conference talking about those things is really quite germane to all of us who are involved in the healthcare system and the healthcare industry. So great to have a chance to do those things. As I wind up, so that's great and good. As I wind up, I want to just take a moment also to say that in addition to this being our 22nd conference, it's going to be the last one in which Andy Pellicano will be our dean. He's stepping down after a wonderful tenure of nearly a decade as the dean of the Paul Merage School. And he's going to stay with us on campus and help with many other things. Wealth management, if I'm correct, which are things I'd like to learn more about, Andy, but really aspire to learn about. But appreciate, but I just want to say that we've been very, very excited at the growth of the Merage School, its relevance to the community, the things that it's done to help so many people, and more personally, the wonderful citizen and friend and leader that Andy has been here on the campus for all of us. And so I'd like to just take a moment before we officially begin the conference to give a round of applause to Andy Pellicano.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. And I must tell you that it has absolutely been my honor and pleasure to serve under Michael Drake. And under this period of time, you have to recognize that our very young university, fewer than 50 years old, the accomplishments that we have achieved under Michael's leadership, the recent ranking over in London of our university as #1 among universities under 50 years old in the United States, #4 in the world. That doesn't happen without a visionary leader. Thank you so much, Chancellor. Now, in the business school, we like to think the whole world revolves around what we do, but that's not quite the truth, although close to it. And the interesting thing is, though, as you walk across our campus, and I hope many of you do in our 22nd year, I hope sometimes you do get a chance not only to be here in the Beckman Center, but take a look around the rest of the university. And as I see in the audience today, folks like Shelley Greenfield, who's running our cancer center, and other researchers at our hospital and our medical school, and recognize the kind of work that's taking place on our campus. Just pick up any publication out of the university today, and you'll find leadership in the stem cell area with faculty members, researchers who are taking a look at curing diseases that have long times been disabling folks. And also take a look at recently, scientists on our campus discovered a way to control epileptic seizures. And also very recently, we discovered the gene that promotes longevity of life. Now, all of these are wonderful discoveries. The last one I'm having a little trouble with. You realize, because the longer we live, the more expensive we become. And until we figure out a way to pay for those longer living folks, I think we're going to have a conundrum, and that's the kind of thing we're facing. And that's why this conference is so important every year, is how do we provide health care for a growing population that's living longer, and with a growing increased retirement population with fewer people working to support the retirees. I think those are the issues that are before us. And in our 22nd year. So now I want to really get to the program. We don't have very much time, so I'm not going to take any time to tell you about our recent rankings in the Financial Times, for example, where the executive MBA was ranked 10th in the country, yay. And I won't tell you also that they ranked in our full-time MBA program, we're 5th in placement this year, which is terrific in the country. That's with Harvard, Wharton, Kellogg, and so on, right there. Those are all fun things. And the last fun thing I'll just mention is we are building a new building. And it's interesting, people say, well, everybody's going to distance education. Why do you need a new building? I will tell you about the library in the new building, however. It is a closet, 4x4, and it has iPads in it. That's our library. And also, though, the building is really a structure that promotes what I would call this hybrid learning model, where a lot of the education is done by students on their own online. But the real value of the education is when you bring folks together in a team atmosphere. How many of you work in teams right now, every day, right? So the concept is we have 20, 25 breakout rooms. They're high-tech breakout rooms. It's a sophisticated version of Apple TV, working on your iPad. Whatever's on your iPad, within seconds, is up on the screen. When you walk in the room, you can reserve the room, reserve the meeting, control the temperature from afar in these rooms. We have breakout areas outside and open areas with white noise filters around them. So with your iPad, you control the noise coming in and out of the area. The technology that's available in this room is really for thinking about how people operate, how people are going to be utilizing technology into the future, very, very high tech. And so we're very excited about our new building, which will be done in about 1.5 to 2 years. We invite you to actually come over and see what we're doing once we're open. So with that, my real role here today is to recognize a few individuals before we begin. First of all, the patron saint of our program for 22 years, who makes everything work just marvelously. And as someone said as they walked in, when Margaret Wong says, go sit down, you go sit down, right? And let's give Margaret Wong a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Margaret. And then secondly, the icon on our faculty who's going to get us going right now is Paul Feldstein. All of you know Paul, a recognized leader through his research in this area for many, many years. Ever since I've been here, Paul keeps coming in and saying, I'd like to retire. I keep saying, no, you can't. Last year, I finally allowed him to retire. But this year, he's actually working more hours for us than he was when he was working full-time. So I don't know how that works in Paul's mind, but it's working great for us. So please join me in welcoming our icon, Paul Feldstein.
Thank you, Andy. I did retire in June, and I've been recalled, and I'm working the same, and I'm not sure why I did that, but it's good to be. I want to continue my association with the school. I also want to welcome all of you to the 22nd annual conference that Margaret and I have put on now for all these years. I also want to thank you for coming. I particularly want to thank our sponsors for helping support us, and a lot of the speakers who have come a long distance to come here. So I want to thank them. Before we get started, I'd like to make a few announcements. And one is that we are recruiting for our Healthcare Executive MBA program, which starts this fall. It's a 2-year program. It meets once a month for a long weekend. And I think in these changing times, an MBA will be very useful for many physicians and healthcare professionals for the courses that you learn to help you in this kind of changing environment. The other kind of announcements is that, your badge is your entrance to all the events here, so you should wear it at all times, particularly for the lunches, so you get fed. The other thing is that you get continuing education credits for those physicians, nurses, and Department of Insurance individuals that are interested, and please don't forget to sign up at the registration desk. When we have questions, since the whole program is being taped, when you have a question, would you wait till someone gives the cordless mic to you so it'll all be recorded? And we also have a conference evaluation form in the booklet, so please fill it out for the speakers and the program, because the information helps us decide how we can better serve you. And lastly, please remember to mute your cell phones, okay? I'll put it on vibrate, just like the movie theater.